on the News Channel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. I'm Ben Hall. A good topic tonight. We all know Nashville is booming, but there are certain parts of the city and certain parts of the county that have not been able to participate in that growth, that perhaps feel left behind. The mayor recently convened a group to study this, to how can we have greater economic inclusion. We want to talk about that. This study, it just came out, maybe in late October. Let's talk about it. We have some time here to talk about it. We have with us, we're happy to have with us John Murphy, Senior Advisor for the Economic Inclusion Office of Mayor Barry. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you for having me.
So, as I just said, there are parts of the city that are booming, but there are other parts that are clearly left behind. You've studied this. How big of a problem issue do you see that?
It depends on the part of the city. We've seen a lot of growth, mainly just in parts of the downtown core, Germantown, Salemtown. You've seen a lot of growth and expansion in the last 5 years. It's precipitated by housing prices, and I'm sure you've had, Adrian Harris, the mayor's senior advisor for housing, Morgan Mansa, who's the executive director for the Barnes Fund, two of colleagues that I work very closely with. But then there are other contributing factors to why an individual can't make rent or can't afford their mortgage. And a lot of cases, it has to do with credit score. A lot of cases, it has to do with they've been turned around on debt, and they may have used a financial product that has higher interest rates. That they've had to take another financial product to pay that product back, and it's kind of a revolving cycle of debt. So we wanted to look at the mayor charged the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee with coming up with a Nashville vision for what it means for the city to be economically inclusive, and how we prioritize policies and programs that lift people into more financial security.
So how do we do that realistically? It sounds great, but how does that not then become a flowery report that just kind of sits on a shelf and gathers dust? How is it realistic that we can really do something here?
Yeah, that was the mayor's number one charge. She tapped Eddie George and Dr. Joseph to co-chair the advisory committee together. Her number one charge was, don't let it be a report that sits on a shelf. I don't want recommendations that are going to go, 5 years out, 10 years out, that are likely unfunded, or that we need to go and, to council to get some type of massive approval for. I want it to be actionable. I want it to be implementable, and often, in these types of reports, we look at existing programs and policies and how we can augment them to perform better. Sometimes it's reallocation of resources that are already in existing budgets. Sometimes it's capacity building. A perfect example of this would be the advisory committee broke into 3 subcommittees. A subcommittee on financial education, one on financial empowerment, and another on financial capability. And in the financial empowerment subcommittee, which was chaired by Eddie George, they looked at our system right now as it exists for financial empowerment services. So organizations that are providing financial empowerment, whatever that is defined by that organization. Not every organization provides robust one-on-one financial counseling. When we looked at that, we said, how can we make a recommendation that leads to improving the capacity and capability of organizations to provide that type of financial counseling? And that recommendation, says, we need to form a steering committee of those organizations that are most impacted with individuals that need financial counseling. So think of Project Return. They assist individuals, returning from incarceration that need workforce development. They need financial empowerment services for sure. They need housing navigation. And all of these things put together, financial education, financial understanding is the glue that holds a house and a job together. And that organization is right to have that type of service available. So that organization, with other like-minded organizations that work with, the Financial Empowerment Center, which has been doing professional one-on-one financial counseling for 5 years, can really build that capacity. So we really need to define the field and work together to build that capacity with those organizations.
And you came up with a series of recommendations. We'll kind of go through those in a moment. But are other cities doing this? Any city you go into, there are going to be areas that are prosperous and then areas that are not prosperous.
Yeah.
Are other cities doing the same kind of thing? Or how unusual is it that we studied it in the way that we did?
It's pretty unique that a city would take on this type of scope that it looks at kind of the life cycle of finance. There are some cities that have advisory committees or steering committees or blue ribbon commissions, or there's a lot of other names that you can throw out there that that look at something very specific or intentional when it comes to their economy. It's pretty unique that a city would take this on. When we did our research and we looked across the country, we found a few models that looked at financial literacy as the issue that they were looking at. Vermont, as a state, looked at it. Massachusetts, the Treasurer's Office in the state of Massachusetts, that actually helped us kind of go through the process and procedure that they used, looked at specifically, what financial education was being provided in elementary, what financial education was being provided at high school, and what financial education was being provided even in colleges. We looked at financial literacy and financial education really specifically at MMPS mostly, but that it's the way that the subcommittee really, or that the advisory committee talks about it in the report is, when you have a gear system and the cogs on a bike, and you have 3 speeds, if you will, that chain is kind of revolving on all of those. If one of those cogs is loose, or it's not greased well enough, the chain's not going to spin as efficiently or as effectively. And we want all 3 of these cogs spinning in the right direction and well greased. And that's why we have financial literacy, empowerment, and capability to try and hit each of these life cycles.
So this was launched in 2016. I think just recently, Eddie George and others presented it. That was in October.
Yeah.
And I guess how often did you meet? What was your process here?
Yeah, so the process that we landed on, we kind of borrowed a bit from the state of Massachusetts, the Treasurer's Office in Massachusetts. They had likewise had 3 subcommittees, and those subcommittees could meet at a frequency that those subcommittees felt was appropriate for that type of issue or that type of engagement. Each subcommittee really approached the work in a different way. There were 3 chairs of the subcommittees. Eddie was one for the financial empowerment, Dr. Joseph for financial literacy, and Justice Koch, who's the dean of the Nashville School of Law, was the financial capability subcommittee chair. He approached it in a bit of a different, methodical, very linearly thinking way, procedural, which a lot of lawyers and justices do. In terms of frequency of meetings, it varied. Some financial literacy, some met by conference call, some met in person every time. On average, they would have 1 to 2 meetings a month. There is a lot of staff support from the mayor's office, from NGOs. We worked with a lot of national groups. Bloomberg Associates, which is a nonprofit consultancy that Mayor Bloomberg established when he left office, were big supports. So there was a lot of assistance and a lot of technical advice that went into the report.
And how, again, when you talk about the problem, how far behind are certain areas?
Yeah.
You have some areas that are way up here, some areas way down here, and do you fear that it's just getting worse?
That's certainly a fair. Anytime that you're dealing with an economy this size, you fear that there's going to be some that are going to be lagging behind. There was a recent report that came out by the Urban Institute, and it's a dashboard that looks at, I believe, 25 different metropolitan cities, and they categorize different cities into where they are from an economic inclusion or economic or financial inclusion spectrum. Nashville was ranked as a city that is faring better than most, but we also have significant financial insecurity. And the way that they ranked that was looking at the unbanked population, which is 10%, which is higher than the national average for cities our size.
So they don't have a bank account?
They don't have a bank account.
Okay.
They looked at debt delinquency, which in Nashville hovers about between 36 and 38% of the population have some type of delinquent debt, and then credit scores. And by the national average, we have about 10, 15 lower credit scores than the national average for a city of our size. So when you look at the kind of the economic spectrum, a lot of cities now are not looking at the traditional economic indicators: unemployment rate, workforce participation, wage growth. We have to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, because unemployment is going to be okay.
Right.
Generally speaking, I'm interested in that. Why do you think we have lower credit scores than other areas?
I think on average, and this is the statistics in Tennessee kind of bear this out. Tennesseans carry a lot of debt. We are a consumer-based economy. We have no income tax, but we make a lot of that up, right, in sales tax. We have a high sales tax. So we're a consumption-based economy, and people spend a lot more, put a lot more on credit, and then carry that credit. We also have a lot of deferred presentment, check cashing or payday loan industry throughout Tennessee, and especially in Nashville, which a lot of people rely on, especially the unbanked and underbanked. Rely on those types of services. So,
do you come down on something like that, on an industry like that that's very powerful? We've certainly done stories about, they pretty much get what they want in the legislature. And then there's the argument that there's so many people that don't have a bank account that this is a needed thing for them, but boy, the interest rates that are charged and that kind of thing, others say way out of control and something needs to be done. And then we're going to take a break, I promise. But does a steering committee or an organization, in your meetings, was that discussed? What do we do about the payday loan industry?
Yeah, there was a number of discussions about payday loan. The Financial Empowerment Subcommittee, one of the methods that they used to kind of wrestle this question, their scope of work that they had, was to do a field research and talk with a number of social service-based organizations and figure out the barriers that they saw to individuals breaking into the financial mainstream. And one of those significant barriers were existing debt from a payday loan product.
I bet.
And that was without exception. Almost every organization that the committee talked to said that was a major barrier for them. So I think that the report does a very good job of outlining just what you said. There is a need for a type of product that someone can access quickly. The notion that that this type of product is extending risky credit to those who have no credit is a gamble for the institution. I think that the report, I think does a good job again of talking about this. The issue isn't necessarily that one-time use or that there is a product of this kind. It's that when it's become relied on as a de facto banking product, is when there becomes an issue. There's a very big difference between a deferred presentment institution and a bank or a credit union or another financial institution, and that is not necessarily always made clear to the end user. And so that's one component of the report is it fills the need, right? The product wouldn't exist if there wasn't a need. But how do we craft other products that can be in the marketplace that can help and benefit those consumers that need it?
All right, we have to take a break. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.